If you are building a business or um, launching a product or honestly even just trying to get a new project off the ground today, you're probably familiar with a very specific kind of exhaustion.
Oh, absolutely. It's brutal out there.
Right. You open your laptop, you look at your market, and it is just completely saturated. Everyone is competing for the exact same clicks on the exact same feeds.
Yeah, fighting for scraps, really.
Exactly. You're constantly tweaking your features, maybe matching your competitors' discounts, and fighting for like a fraction of a percent of market share. I mean, it is a relentless, draining grind just to avoid falling behind.
Because it is the ultimate zero-sum game. You are forced to operate under this assumption that the only way for you to win is if someone else loses, right? You're just fighting over a fixed amount of demand.
Which is so depressing.
Yeah.
But as I was going through the source material for today, I started reading about these outlier companies that, well, they don't seem to be playing that game at all.
No, they really aren't.
They aren't flashing prices. They aren't obsessing over their rivals.
Yeah.
It's like they just walked away from the crowded market entirely, found this wide open space where no one else even exists, and just set up shop.
Which sounds like magic, but there's a real science to it.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Mm.
We're pulling the core framework from the expanded edition of the international bestseller Blue Ocean Strategy by W. Jen Kim and Renee Mauborgne.
It's a classic for a reason.
It really is. The mission today is to equip you with the exact tools you need to stop bleeding out in those overcrowded markets and start building your own uncontested space.
And, the authors use a very visceral metaphor to describe this shift in perspective. They basically divide the business universe into two oceans.
Okay.
So the red oceans represent all the industries in existence today. The boundaries are firmly defined, and the rules of competition are universally accepted by everyone playing the game.
Right. Everyone knows the drill.
Exactly. Companies try to outperform their rivals to grab a greater share of the existing demand. But as that space gets crowded, the prospects for profit and growth just shrink. Products turn into interchangeable commodities.
And that cutthroat head-to-head competition, that's what turns the water bloody.
Precisely. Hence, red oceans.
Which sounds like a miserable place to spend your career. But then on the other side, you have the blue oceans.
The fun part.
Yeah. These are the unknown market spaces. They're defined by entirely untapped demand and highly profitable growth. And the best part, in a blue ocean, the competition is completely irrelevant because, well, the rules of the game haven't even been written yet.
Now, I know the idea of just magically inventing a space with no competitors can sound a bit like a business fairy tale.
For sure, it sounds almost too good to be true.
Right, but if we look at the historical data the authors present, blue oceans are constantly being created. I mean, think about 120 years ago. Automobiles, aviation, management consulting, they essentially didn't exist.
Wow, yeah, you're right.
Fast forward to 40 years ago. Cell phones, minivans, discount retail. We are just so deeply conditioned by this traditional military-style strategy, where you fight over a limited, constant piece of land, that we forget our capacity to create new territory entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we know what a blue ocean is conceptually. But why is it an absolute imperative for you, the listener, to care about this right now? Like, why can't you just put your head down and focus on being, say, 5% better or 5% cheaper than your rivals?
That's the trap.
It is. Well, the authors studied the business launches of 108 companies across various industries, and the data they collected is honestly staggering.
It really is. It puts a very hard mathematical cost on what it actually means to compete in a red ocean.
Right. So out of these 108 launches, 86% of them were line extensions, meaning they were just incremental improvements within an existing red ocean.
A slightly better razor, a slightly faster software.
Exactly. And sure, those safe red ocean moves accounted for 62% of total revenues, but they only brought in 39% of total profits.
What's fascinating here is the massive contrast when you look at the blue ocean launches. That remaining 14% of launches, the ones aimed at creating entirely new market space, they generated 38% of total revenues and a staggering 61% of total profits.
That's wild. 61% of the profits from 14% of the launches.
The performance benefits are just undeniable. But the authors make a crucial point here. This isn't just about maximizing profit anymore. It's about basic survival.
How so?
Well, if you look at the macro trends in more and more industries, supply is vastly exceeding demand. Technology is allowing companies to produce more, faster. Globalization is wiping out the little niche monopolies that used to protect local businesses.
Right. Anyone can compete from anywhere now.
Exactly. When you combine infinite supply with accelerated commoditization, surviving in a red ocean isn't just exhausting, it's mathematically unsustainable.
It makes me think of traditional strategy, like a literal sports game. Two teams on the field, a fixed amount of time, a fixed score. One team's win is mathematically tied to the other team's loss.
A perfect analogy.
But, while reading this, I did find myself pushing back on the premise a bit, because isn't industry structure just a fixed reality we all have to deal with?
That's the common assumption.
Right. Let's say you decide to open a coffee shop. It feels like you have to play by coffee shop rules. You need a commercial espresso machine, you need baristas, you need a certain type of seating, and you need paper cups. If you don't have those, people won't even recognize you as a coffee shop.
And that intuition you are describing is exactly what the authors challenge. It's what they call the structuralist view, or environmental determinism.
Environmental determinism.
Yeah, it's this deeply ingrained assumption that industry boundaries are basically handed down from on high, and you are forced to figure out how to compete within them. You look at the coffee shop environment and assume those rules are laws of physics. But Blue Ocean strategy operates on what they call the reconstructionist view. This view argues that market boundaries and industry structures are not a given. They are entirely artificial.
They're just made up.
Exactly. They were built by the actions and beliefs of previous players, which means they can be reconstructed by your actions and beliefs today. You do not have to fight over the existing pie. You can bake an entirely new one.
I really appreciate that distinction. So if the goal is to shape a new reality and bake that new pie, what is the actual mechanism? Like, how do we do that?
Well, the source material points to one core ingredient.
And this is the absolute cornerstone of Blue Ocean strategy, right? Value innovation.
Yes, value innovation.
But to fully grasp value innovation, we first have to understand the old rule it breaks.
The value-cost trade-off. If there's a dogma of conventional strategy, this is it.
Traditional strategy says you have to make a hard choice. You can either create incredibly high value for your customer, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to produce.
Or you can create reasonable basic value at a low cost. You are fundamentally choosing between differentiation or low cost. If you want to build a luxury car, you have to use expensive leather and custom engineering.
And if you want to build a cheap car, it's going to have cloth seats and a basic engine.
Exactly.
And value innovation breaks this trade-off completely. The authors define it as the pursuit of differentiation and low cost simultaneously.
Which sounds like an oxymoron.
It does, but we need to be clear about the how here. It is not about deploying bleeding-edge technology. It's not just about being the first one to market. It is about fundamentally aligning your innovation with utility, price, and cost.
Okay, so you drive your costs down by systematically eliminating and reducing the factors your industry has always competed on.
Yes.
But at the exact same time, you drive buyer value up by raising and creating elements the industry has never even thought to offer.
You've got it. The case study in the book that perfectly illustrates this mechanism is Cirque du Soleil. Now, it's easy to look at them today and see this massive empire, but the inception of this is wild.
It really is an incredible story.
You have Guy Laliberté, a former accordion player and fire eater, who takes over this circus company. But the traditional circus industry at the time was the definition of a red ocean. It was a dying, highly unattractive market.
Oh, absolutely.
They've got kids who would rather stay home and play video games. You have growing animal rights pressures, making animal acts a PR nightmare. And you've got Ringling Brothers setting this impossible, expensive standard that everyone else is just blindly trying to copy.
Exactly. And if Laliberté had operated from that structuralist view, if he believed he had to play by the traditional circus rules, he would have tried to beat Ringling Brothers at their own game.
Which would have been a disaster.
Right. He would have tried to hire even more famous clowns, put more lions in the cage, or, I don't know, maybe add a fourth ring to the three-ring tent.
Which would have been a terrifying pitch to make to any investor. Just like, hey, I'm going to spend millions more on animals and stars in an industry with shrinking demand. I mean, it would have raised his costs astronomically without fundamentally changing the dying circus experience.
But they didn't do that. They reconstructed the market by looking at the underlying cost drivers. They realized that the most expensive parts of the circus, the animal shows, the star performers, the massive three-ring arenas, the aisle concession sales, these were actually things the public was starting to care less and less about.
So they simply eliminated them.
They did. Just think about the sheer logistical cost savings there. No buying elephants, no housing them, feeding them, or dealing with the insurance and medical costs of transporting them.
That's huge.
And no paying exorbitant fees to star performers who, frankly, couldn't compete with movie stars anyway.
They completely stripped the chassis.
Right.
They eliminated those massive costs, but they kept the tent to maintain that circus feel. And they kept the clowns, but they shifted them from like standard slapstick to elegant.
Right.
But this is the critical pivot. They didn't just cut things to be a cheap circus. They looked across the boundary at an entirely different industry, which was theater.
Yes, theater.
And they brought in things a circus had never seen. A cohesive storyline, intellectual richness, original artistic music and dance, multiple different productions running simultaneously.
This is how differentiation and low cost happen in reality. By bringing in the sophistication of theater, they offered unprecedented utility to an entirely new group of customers.
Adults and corporate clients.
Exactly. And because they were offering a premium theater-like experience, they could confidently raise the ticket price to theater levels, which was, several times higher than a traditional circus ticket.
Wow.
So let's look at the mechanics. They completely bypassed the shrinking demographic of children, achieved dramatically lower costs by cutting the animals and stars, and created massive differentiation by adding theater elements. They baked a new pie.
But if you were listening to this right now, trying to apply it to your software startup or your consulting firm, you can't just randomly guess what to cut and what to add. If Cirque had guessed wrong and cut the acrobats instead of the animals, they would have failed.
No, instantly.
You need a systematic tool.
Precisely. And the foundational diagnostic tool the authors provide is called the strategy canvas.
Okay, strategy canvas.
Picture a basic graph. The horizontal axis represents the range of factors that an industry currently competes on and invests in. The vertical axis captures the offering level that buyers receive across those factors. A high score means a high level of investment. When you plot a company's performance across these various factors and connect the dots, you get what is called their value curve.
The analogy that came to mind while reading this is an audio mixing board in a recording studio.
I like that.
You've got all these different sliders on the board: bass, treble, reverb, volume. In a red ocean, every single competitor is sitting in front of the exact same mixing board. They just look at the market leader and say, okay, they have their bass set to 7, let's push ours to 8. They have treble at 4, let's do 5.
Just fighting for an edge.
Right, they're just nudging the existing sliders up and down. Blue ocean strategy is about looking at that board and saying, why do we even have a bass slider? Let's rip it out entirely, and let's install 3 brand new sliders that no one in this industry has ever seen. If your value curve perfectly overlaps with your competitors, you are trapped in a red ocean.
That's spot on. And to help you figure out exactly which sliders to rip out and which to install, the authors created the 4 actions framework.
Okay, what are the 4 actions?
These are 4 highly specific questions you must force yourself to answer to break the industry logic. First, what factors should be eliminated that the industry has long taken for granted? Second, what factors should be reduced well below the industry standard? Third, what factors should be raised well above the industry standard? And fourth, what factors should be created that the industry has never offered?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to look at how a company actually researched this in the real world. Let's look at the U.S. wine industry in the early 2000s.
A very saturated market.
Highly saturated. According to the book, this market was intensely competitive and totally stagnant. You had premium wines and budget wines. And if you plotted them on that strategy canvas, they had the exact same shape.
Yep.
They all competed on aging quality, vineyard prestige, wine complexity, and heavy enological terminology. The premium wines just had all those sliders pushed up high, and the budget wines had them pushed down low, but they were all playing the same game.
And if you looked at the actual consumer behavior, it was incredibly intimidating for the average American adult. Wine was seen as pretentious and complex.
We're sure.
So an Australian winery called Casella Wines applied the 4 actions framework. But here is the secret to how they did it. Instead of running focus groups with existing wine snobs to see how to make their wine better, they looked at alternatives.
Like what?
They looked at beer and ready-to-drink cocktails, and they focused intensely on non-customers. They found that a massive chunk of American adults actively rejected wine because the complex taste was just too difficult to appreciate, and the purchasing experience was overwhelming.
So based on that insight, they created Yellowtail. Let's run it through the 4 actions. What did they eliminate? Well, they ripped out all the confusing ecological terminology on the bottle, they completely eliminated aging qualities, and they slashed the massive above-the-line marketing budgets.
Huge cost savings right there.
Exactly. What did they reduce? They reduced vineyard prestige, the complexity of the wine itself, and the dizzying range of options.
But then what did they raise? They raised the price slightly compared to budget wines, signaling better quality without hitting premium prices. And most importantly, what did they create? They created an easy drinking wine that was soft and sweet, instantly approachable for someone used to drinking beer. They created ease of selection.
Right. When they launched, they only offered one white, a Chardonnay, and one red, a Shiraz.
That's it.
They used the exact same shaped bottle for both. And they created a sense of fun. They had this vibrant, simple label with a kangaroo on it, no tasting notes about oak or tannins. They even gave retail store clerks Outback gear to wear, which turned those clerks into enthusiastic brand ambassadors because, honestly, for the first time, selling wine wasn't intimidating for them either.
And the result was explosive. Yellowtail didn't just steal a few points of market share from other vineyards. They expanded the actual size of the market by pulling beer and cocktail drinkers into the wine aisle.
It became the fastest-growing brand in the history of the U.S. wine industry.
Exactly. They didn't try to make a better wine according to the structuralist rules. They just made the old rules irrelevant.
And that highlights a repeatable system. Yellowtail didn't stumble onto those non-customers by accident. They succeeded specifically because they systematically look outside their conventional industry boundaries.
Yes. The authors call this the 6 Paths framework. It solves the problem of search risk. Like, how do you find these blue oceans without just throwing darts at a board?
Yeah.
We're going to focus on the first 2 paths, which are highly actionable.
Right. So path 1 is looking across alternative industries.
And we have to clearly differentiate between substitutes and alternatives here. Substitutes have different forms, but provide the exact same function.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, financial software and a human CCA are substitutes. They both balance your books. Alternatives, however, have different forms and different functions, but they achieve the same objective.
Ah, got it.
A cinema and a restaurant are alternatives. You go to both for a fun night out, even though the actual experience of watching a movie versus eating a meal is completely different.
The case study that blew my mind for Path 1 was NetJets. They basically invented the blue ocean of fractional jet ownership by understanding this dynamic perfectly.
They really did.
They realized that high-level corporate travelers were effectively choosing between 2 stark alternatives, fly commercial or buy a corporate jet. So they looked at the why. Why do people choose commercial airlines? It's entirely to avoid the massive multi-million-dollar fixed investment of buying a plane, plus the nightmare of pilot salaries and hangar fees.
Right.
But why do people buy a private jet? For the incredible speed, avoiding crowded airport hubs, and the ability to fly point to point without layovers.
So NetJets focused on extracting the decisive advantages of both alternatives and eliminating everything else. They started selling fractions of a jet, for instance, 1/16th of an aircraft for around $400,000. That gave the buyer 50 flight hours a year.
So what is the value curve?
Well, you get the speed and convenience of private travel, a coast-to-coast flight taking 5 hours instead of 10.5 on commercial. But you get the significantly lower variable cost of a commercial ticket. And they completely eliminated the deadhead costs and management headaches of sole ownership.
And just to show this applies across tech as well, the book mentions the Japanese telecom NTT Docomo with their iMode service.
Oh, yeah.
They did the exact same thing by looking at the internet versus mobile phones in the late 90s. Laptops gave you killer apps and information, but they were expensive, and the internet was cluttered. Cell phones were highly mobile and cheap, but they only did voice.
So Docomo created a simple one-button interface on the cell phone that accessed a few pre-approved killer apps on a unified bill. By looking across alternatives, they built the first mass-adopted smartphone experience.
Which brings us to Path 2, looking across strategic groups within your own industry.
Right. A strategic group is simply a cluster of companies pursuing a similar strategy, usually ranked by a hierarchy of price and performance. Think about the automotive industry. You have the luxury car group, the mid-range group, and the economy group.
Okay, makes sense.
The fatal flaw is that most companies only ever pay attention to the rivals within their own specific strategic group.
But the fitness franchise curves created a blue ocean by looking across them. In the U.S. fitness market, you essentially had 2 strategic groups. On one hand, you had traditional health clubs.
Very intimidating for some.
Yeah, they were upscale, cost $100 a month, catered to both men and women, featured juice bars, saunas, and a workout usually took an hour or two.
And on the other hand,
You had home exercise programs like VHS tapes that were cheap, private, and saved a ton of time, but they lacked any external motivation, making it incredibly hard to stick with them.
so Kurz engaged in deep customer research. They asked, what actually makes women trade up or down between these two groups? They discovered that the vast majority of women didn't actually want the luxury amenities like juice bars, and they actively disliked the experience of working out in front of men or waiting for machines.
Right.
They just wanted the motivation and accountability of working out with other people. So Curves aggressively eliminated the juice bars, the mirrors, the men, and the complex machines where you constantly have to adjust heavy weights.
Wow.
They created a supportive, women-only environment with a very simple 30-minute circular workout, and they placed these gyms in cheap, accessible, non-city center locations.
See, when I was reading the Curve story, my immediate instinct was to push back. It really seems like they took a lot of things away from the customer. No pool, no mirrors, no heavy free weights. Doesn't the free market naturally punish you for offering less?
That's probably the most common misconception about Blue Ocean strategy. It raises an essential question about what value actually means to a consumer.
How so?
Curves wasn't offering less. They were eliminating factors that the fitness industry falsely assumed were valuable. By cutting out the expensive urban real estate, the saunas, and the complex machinery, Curves drastically lowered their cost structure.
Oh, I see.
That freed up the capital to create unprecedented value in the exact areas their target customer actually cared about. A non-judgmental environment, extreme affordability, and a highly efficient workout that only takes 30 minutes. It is never about offering less. It's about offering different, highly targeted value based on what non-customers actually want.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, the listener.
Right.
So you've done the work, you've sketched out your strategy canvas, you've ruthlessly applied the 4 actions, and you've looked across alternatives to find non-customers.
You've got your plan.
You've drawn a brand new value curve. How do you actually know if this new curve is a commercially viable blue ocean or just, a terrible idea that's going to bankrupt you?
The authors provide a very clear litmus test for exactly that scenario. Every effective blue ocean strategy must possess 3 distinct characteristics.
Okay, what's the first?
First is focus. You simply cannot diffuse your efforts across all factors of competition. If your curve shows you trying to be everything to everyone, your cost structure will be unmanageably high, and your execution will be a mess.
Makes sense. What's the second?
Second is divergence. The shape of your value curve must stand completely apart from the industry average. It cannot be a reactive Me Too strategy.
Okay.
And third, it must have a compelling tagline. The strategy has to be so clear that it can be communicated truthfully and powerfully in a single sentence.
The ultimate example of passing this test is Southwest Airlines. Talk about divergence. By focusing on driving a car as the true alternative to flying, their value curve looks nothing like a legacy airline.
Not at all.
They were ruthlessly focused. They eliminated the meals. They eliminated the VIP lounges. They eliminated the complex hub-and-spoke connectivity. Instead, they raised the speed of check-in and the frequency of point-to-point departures.
And because they had intense focus and extreme divergence, the tagline is effortless. The speed of a plane at the price of a car whenever you need it.
So good.
Exactly. And you can actually use the strategy canvas in reverse as a diagnostic tool to see if you are failing this test.
Really?
Yeah. For example, if you map out your new idea and your canvas shows high scores across every single factor, that is a massive red flag.
Why is that a red flag?
It means you are over-delivering without a financial payback, which will inevitably drive up your costs and destroy your margins. Furthermore, if the terminology you're using on your canvas relies on heavy internal jargon like labeling a factor megahertz instead of speed, or synergistic integration instead of ease of use, it means you have an internally driven inside-out perspective.
You're building for yourself, not for what the customer actually values.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? As we wrap up this deep dive, the main takeaway from the data and these case studies is incredibly empowering. You do not need to be some visionary genius with a crystal ball to innovate.
No, not at all.
You just need a systematic approach. By actively breaking the value-cost trade-off, and by systematically looking across alternatives and strategic groups using these frameworks, you can quite literally make your competition irrelevant.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've spent a lot of time talking about multi-million-dollar companies today, but try applying this lens to your own daily life.
I love that.
Think about the products, software, or services you use every single day where you constantly find yourself settling, or the tasks where you have to awkwardly cobble together two different industries just to get the actual result you want.
We all have those.
Right. Where are the non-customers in your own life? The daily frustrations and friction points that you just accept as the way it is, those are the exact coordinates for your first blue ocean.
Stop fighting everyone else for a bloody patch of sand. Grab a blank canvas, map out the sliders in your industry, figure out exactly which ones to rip off the board, and start drawing your new value curve. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.